All right, so we're going to start. I want to start with the bowl. Um, when you're creating a bowl, there are a lot of ways to make bowls. I'm going to show you one of those ways. Realize that there are different levels of bowl design. A lot of you could do this bowl in about 2 seconds and have it, and it'll work just fine. But realize the more time you spend, the more detail-oriented you become, the better the overall final project. So, to create a bowl, actually I need to save the file real quick, just as good measure. I'm going to save this scene, and I'm going to call this one bowl. Actually, I'm going to do the bowl, the cup, and the spoon all in the same file. So I'm going to call this one bowl, cup, spoon. Okay, just to create the bowl, I'm going to grab a sphere. And we can always work on the size and scale later. So I'm making a sphere, making it fairly big. Now I need to cut the sphere in half. The best way to cut the sphere in half is to actually do it from the side view. So I'm going to click over to my 4 view, look over either my front or my side view, right click and hold, go into face mode, highlight the top half of the sphere and hit delete. And now I have a bowl. In its very simplest form, this is a bowl. Now there's a couple of things wrong with this that I can point out right away. First of all, if I were to put this bowl on a table, it would roll over. Think about it like a watermelon. Like if this was a watermelon that I cut in half, it would rock back and forth on the table. So the second I start throwing in cereal into there, it's going to rock. We don't want to do that. So I'll need to flatten out the bottom. The other thing that you may have noticed is the inside of this is black. And as a concept, these shapes, when we create these shapes, we create them, they are essentially infinitely thin. If I said paper thin, that would be incorrect. There's no thickness to the face wall. Okay? And when I see black like this, I'm essentially seeing the back side of a face. They're called normals, and we'll get into that at a future date. But right now, I know that I can make this bowl better by flattening the bottom and then giving it some thickness. And that's really the point of this assignment, is to teach you how to use the extrude tool to give things thickness. But before I give this thickness, I want to flatten out the bottom. And to do so, I am going to go back into my side view. I'm going to right click and hold and go into face mode. And I'm going to select the bottom 4 or 5 rows, 4 or 5 edge loops there. If I come to my top, I can count. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's good. Okay, I don't need to do any more than that. So I just selected essentially 4 rows, and you can see that those are selected here. To flatten out the bottom, all I do is hit R, which is my scale tool, and if I grab the green arrow or the green cube and just push straight down, that just flattens out the bottom of the bowl. And depending on how your settings are, it's not going to let me push those in at all. It's just going to flatten out and be done. So I could call that good, but as I look at the profile of this, it's nice and smooth, and then it gets kind of jarring. So it's nice and smooth, and then I have kind of an angle there. So to avoid that angle, I'm just going to hit W, which is my move tool, and push that right up. Now I have a nice curve that kind of follows itself throughout there. I'm going to right click and go into object mode, and here I have the flat part of my bowl, and now I just need to give it thickness. To give it thickness, I go to my extrude tool. The extrude tool can be found in lots of places. This is the easiest to find, is right here in the corner right here is the extrude tool. You can also find the extrude tool by going to Edit Mesh Extrude. Either way, it works. You can also hit Command E. That also takes you to the extrude tool. As soon as I enact the extrude tool, you can see that I have 2 different ways of using the extrude tool. I have one which is a more visual way, where I can either grab the arrows, the cubes, or even the circle to kind of rotate it. I also have a little options box here that allows me to change the thickness, the local translate Z, the offset, and the divisions. And when I'm doing this, usually all I'll tell you to do is to grab the blue arrow and pull it down. If you push it in, that's fine, but then you've reversed your normals, and that's an extra step. So if you pull it out, just grab the blue arrow and pull it out, there you have a bowl. And we're all but done. I'm going to do one more thing to this just to give it a little bit more interest, to make it have a few more details. But overall, that's basically how you make the bowl. Now, like I said, if you don't want to try using that blue arrow, you could try the local translate Z, adjust that value, and give it some thickness. The thickness value actually works as well to give it some thickness. Offset, this is going to look a little weird, so you may not want to use offset on this. See, the offset kind of pushes that up and down. And then divisions is interesting because then I can give it lots of divisions. So instead of just creating one shell, I'm creating several shells. But I'm going to leave all of those as default for right now. Okay, so I've got my bowl laid out, and like I said, this is fine. You can keep the bowl like this. To make this bowl just look just a little bit better, I'm going to select the bowl, and I'm going to make a duplicate because I actually want to use this original bowl and make some additions. But here on the duplicate, if I like the way this bowl looks, I can go to Mesh and Smooth. And there I have a really nice, a really good looking bowl. So this bowl will work, and there's really nothing wrong with using that bowl. It's just a little bit more chunky. Smoothing the bowl out once was all I needed to do to make this look pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And the reason for that, rather than just smoothing it out and calling it good, I actually want to add some, like I said, a little bit of extra, a little bit of interest. And to do this, I'm going to right-click and hold, go into face mode, and I'm going to start selecting the outside edge only. So I go to my selection tool. If I hold shift, I can add to the selection, and I'm just going to try to get just that top ring, just the outside edge. Okay, so all I've done is I've selected the top edge, and I want to look around and make sure I didn't accidentally select something on the inside or a random face. Looks like I did a good job. So now I'm going to hit the extrude tool one more time, grab the blue arrow and pull it out, and that gave my bowl just a little bit of a lip. Okay, and again, one more step. Now it looks like my top vertices are up a little bit, which is probably because I was playing with the offset. So just because I'm a little bit compulsive about these kinds of things, I'm going to just push those vertices down, try to get them so they sit nice and level with the top lid. That's not critical. That's just something that it'll bother me if it's up just a little bit. Okay, so to finish this off, I'm just going to go to Mesh and Smooth, and I have created a perfect bowl. All right, so now I'm going to get this bowl out of the way, and I want to start my spoon. Okay, my spoon starts in the exact same way as the bowl starts. I start with the sphere, and I'm going to make it big on purpose, and I'm going to cut the sphere in half. So let me go into my side view, right-click and hold, go into face mode, highlight the top faces, hit delete, and here I have now the basin of my spoon. Couple of things. If I'm making a soup spoon, I may want to keep it this shape. Okay, but if I wanted to make more of a cereal spoon, I need to modify the shape. And you can modify the shape before you extrude, or you can modify after you extrude. I find it easier to try to make the big movements and make the big changes quickly while it's in a simpler form rather than in the more difficult form. So I'm going to hit R, which is my scale tool, and I'm going to scale this in. Okay, that makes it oblong, kind of a more egg-shaped. And then I'm just going to flatten it out a little bit. So that makes the basin of the spoon. Okay. So this is exactly, again, this is exactly the same as the bowl, but instead of extruding right away, I just changed the shape of the sphere. You could even do it before you delete all of the faces. You could even make it egg-shaped and then go into face mode, highlight the top faces and hit delete. That's perfectly acceptable. Either way, you get to the same result. So once I've gotten the basin of the spoon, I'm going to extrude it. So I click the extrude button. I'm going to grab the blue arrow, pull it down, and now I have the basin of my spoon. So the last step on this, well, I shouldn't say the last step, but the next step on this spoon is I've got to extrude out the handle. So to extrude out the handle, I want to look and I want to select the back 4 faces. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you want to be careful not to accidentally get ones on the side. You want to make sure that they're centered, because otherwise, watch what happens. So if I come in and I extrude out off the side there, okay, that spoon is obviously not going to work. So let me undo that. And I'm going to select again the back 4 faces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hit the extrude tool. Grab the blue arrow and pull it back. And I know maybe you're a little concerned. Maybe it looks more like a McFlurry spoon at this point. Okay, and so it's a little bit weird, but that's okay. I extrude and give myself about the length of a spoon. Okay, if you mess it up, you can always change it later. If you made it too short or made it too long, you can always go back and make some adjustments later. But I want to go about right there. Now, I'm going to hit R, which is my scale tool, and I'm going to scale this in and scale it down. And then I'm actually going to scale the back faces so that they kind of flatten themselves out, just like so. Okay, so I've essentially just flattened out the back of the spoon. I'm going to hit W, which is my move tool, and I'm going to move it up, kind of angle it over there just a little bit. Hit R, which is my scale tool, scale it in, scale it down, scale it in, scale it down, okay? And if I don't want so much angle, I can always push it down. But there's my spoon. Now, like I did with the bowl, I'm going to make a duplicate. I could just smooth this out, go mesh and smooth, and that looks okay. If I smooth it again, if I do a 2-division smooth, that looks even better. But I still have some weirdness here at the back of my spoon. I have some rough edges. And so to avoid some of those rough edges, I'm going to do what's called inserting an edge loop. Now when you smooth something, essentially what it's going to do is it's going to look at the edge and the faces. And in this case, it's going to see this as a border edge, and it's going to say, okay, so if this needs to be smoothed, I need to come in here and try to shorten the distance, and by adding divisions here and adding divisions here. And that's what happens when I smooth it. Let me go back and just show you again, mesh smooth. So what it did is it tried to add divisions here and here, but what ends up happening is it ends up kind of pulling them and making them a little bit sharp. So to avoid that, I'm going to add some edge loops and then smooth it. And that way, it's not going to try to smooth the distance from here to here. It's only going to smooth the distance from here to here. So to create an insert an edge loop, I go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool. And the Insert Edge Loop Tool does a lot of really cool things. When we do the cup here in just a second, I'm going to show you how you can use the Insert Edge Loop Tool to help with similarly to smoothing out the handle. I'm going to use it to help smooth out our cup. But we'll use the Insert Edge Loop tool on a lot of future projects because it's a real quick way to add divisions to an object without having to use the channels box. It also gives us the ability to add divisions where we want them added. So with the default settings on the Insert Edge Loop tool, I'm going to click on one of the edges. And if I hold and don't let go, I can drag that edge wherever I want it. So I'm going to drag it so that it's about that far away from the end of the handle and let go. And you can see it added a division. Now I'm going to use that tool one more time by going to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool. I'm going to click on the edge and I'm going to add a division right there. The reason I added those is when the smooth algorithm works, instead of again pulling this entire face, this entire border edge and trying to split it up, it's only going to split up this edge here and this edge here. And that should result in a better looking spoon. So again, one more time, I go to Mesh and I go Smooth. And now I have a wonderful spoon. Okay. Right now my spoon's a little too big, but That's what's great about the scale tool. Okay, one last little object for the day. I'm going to create a cup, and the cup uses the same exact tools as the bowl and the spoon. It just uses a different shape. So instead of creating a cup out of a sphere, which I've actually had students do, I've had students come in and cut off the top half of the sphere. I don't quite know why I'm doing this right now, but it might be fun. They'll cut off the top half of the sphere. They'll come in and grab the bottom faces just like we did for the bowl, and they'll flatten the bottom just like so. Now, instead of moving it up, they'll just move it down, something like this, which that kind of looks like an ice cream cone. They'll come in, take the edges, push the edges down a little bit, and just like the spoon and the bowl, use the extrude tool, pull it out, and there they have a cup. And like I said, that's really the same essential tool. It's the same shape, same tools to create a cup. But I want to create a cup using a cylinder, just so I can show you how to kind of extrude in. I think you'll enjoy it. Let's click a cylinder. I'm going to make it big and about cup shape, so about something like that. Okay, it's going to be kind of a tall glass. And before I start extruding, now I could actually come into face mode, hold shift, and select every single one of these faces.
Oh, I found out an easier way. If you go to
But instead of going around and selecting all of the faces, I'm going to go into the channels box. And right here at the top where it says subdivision caps, it's set to 1. If I add 10, now suddenly I have a spider web. But instead I'm going to turn it off by hitting 0. And now I have one solid face. So with one solid face, I'm going to hit the extrude tool. Now this is where it is a little bit different. I've been telling you to just grab the blue arrow and push it down. But if I grab the blue arrow, all that does is it makes those edges infinitely thin, and you can see how I'm getting all sorts of like visual errors there. So instead of grabbing the blue arrow and pulling it in, this time I want to use the offset and just scale in just a little bit. So I can either use the offset here, or if I click on any of the cubes, it'll open up this little center cube that I can then click and kind of drag in. Don't be afraid to give it a little bit of thickness. If you go really, really thin when we extrude down, it's going to end up looking a little bit funny. But I'm going to extrude in just a little bit. Okay, like so. Or I'm sorry, I said that wrong. I'm going to scale in just a little bit. Okay, so give my glass about that much thickness. Now I need to reset the extrude tool. To reset the extrude tool, I just click it one more time. And now I've extruded an additional face. Now at this point, I'm going to grab the blue arrow and push it down. And I'm going to hit 4 so I can see inside of my cup, because the last thing I want to do is go outside the bottom. Okay, I don't want to make like a weird little push pop or anything. Okay, I want to make sure that the bottom of the glass is higher than the bottom of the outside of the glass. So that's probably too high. That might be a little too low. About right there is where I want the inside of my glass to be. So I'm going to right click and go back to object mode. Hit 6 to give myself a shader. And as I look at that cup, that's a decent cup. But again, just like I did with the spoon, just like I did with the bowl, I'm going to just smooth this out just by itself. So if I go to mesh and smooth, okay. Now actually, this isn't a terrible cup. The only thing I need to do is work on these little vertices here at the bottom, because otherwise if I try to put that on the table, it's going to fall over because it looks more like a top. So if I hit 4, which is my wireframe view, and I right click and go into vertex mode, I can come in and select the two pointed vertices and just move them up, kind of flatten those out just like so. And there I'm left with a semi-decent cup. It's kind of fluted at the bottom. Even though there are some hard edges, it's not a bad cup design. But I want my cup to be a little bit different. I want it to be a little smoother. So I'm going to delete that glass. And I'm going to use the insert edge loop tool, and I'm going to insert an edge loop on the outside. I'm going to insert one at the top on the outside and one at the bottom on the outside. And I also want to insert an edge loop on the top on the inside and the bottom on the inside. So I go to I go to Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop Tool. I click on an edge, and I'm going to let it go to about right there. Okay, and then I'm going to click towards the bottom, and I'm going to let it go to about right there. Now, those are my outside edges. The inside edges can be a little bit tricky, especially if you're in your shaded view. But I'm going to click on the inside and try to even that up. It doesn't have to be perfect, but pretty close. And then I'm going to click on the inside one more time and go to the bottom and go just up from the bottom just a little bit. This is where hitting 4 might help. And just go up. Those edge loops will work out just fine. Now I go back to object mode, and I can smooth it out. There is something I decided just now I wanted to do instead of smoothing. I want to kind of taper my cup a little bit. So I'm going to right click and hold and go into vertex mode. Highlight all those top vertices, hit R, and scale them out just a little bit. That makes my cup just a little bit more, just a little tapered, and gives it just a little bit more interest. I go to Mesh and Smooth. And as you can see now, I have a perfect bowl, cup, and spoon that will go really, really well with my cereal box. And again, at some point, I'm going to bring the cereal box, the bowl, the cup, the spoon, into the same file, and we're going to create a room to put all of this stuff in. So sometimes I do it all in one file, but for this particular project, I'm doing the cereal box in one file. I'm doing these 3 items in one file. And then I think I'll do a new file for the kitchen table and the room, and then we'll bring it all together. So that, in about 20 minutes, I think, is how to make a bowl, a spoon, and a cup.